Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this, our December meeting of the Family Services Select Committee. I am Counselor Janet Evans, Chair of the Family Services Select Committee, and I will be chairing tonight's meeting. The event is being streamed live on YouTube, and members of the public and the media are welcome to watch the meeting remotely and listen to the discussions taking place. To keep everyone safe, can I remind all those present to keep to seating arrangements and wear a face covering when moving about the chamber. At the end of the meeting, please leave straight away and please avoid chatting in the hallways as the risk of COVID spread is higher indoors. You can chat outdoors. Now I would like to welcome all those in the council chamber and everyone watching on YouTube. Hello. I think it would be appropriate for us to start with 72 seconds silence to remember those who lost their lives in the Grenfell tragedy. Thank you. At this time, I would like to speak to the whole council and express our sincerest condolences to each and every member in Kensington and Chelsea community who have lost family members, friends, neighbors, colleagues to this coronavirus pandemic. I would also like to dedicate this meeting to Arthur Labinjo Hughes. This is very important that we learn from this and we learn to be better and we make sure this never happens in our borough. I'm sure we've all been just very, very upset about this, and we would like to make sure that we cover and think of what went wrong and what we can learn for. Now, before we proceed with the meeting, I would ask members of the committee to switch off their microphones and only put them on when they are speaking, and turn them off when they are finished. Please remain seated when you are called to speak. Do not stand up. We have apologies tonight from Richard Derekey, Kathleen Williams, Estelia Gomez, and Councilor Robert Freeman have sent their apologies. Dory Schmetterling is stuck in traffic and will be arriving late. Do we have any members who have a declaration of interest? We have now the minutes of the previous select committee meeting. They've been circulated. Does the committee agree to sign them off as a correct record? Agree? Thank you. We will now go to A4, the corporate parenting report. Alex Hanford, the head of social work for families in attendance tonight, to answer questions on the corporate parenting report, and invite the committee's comments. This is an annual report. I would also like to welcome Jane Humphreys, who will be providing expert support to the Select Committee. Jane was Corporate Director of Children, Education, and Social Care at Stockton-on-Tees Borough Council for 7 years and currently works for Local Government Association. She provides independent expertise on safeguarding to LGA members. She is here to advise committee members, but will not be asking questions to officers. And she has been very helpful to us in the last 2 years as well. Can we move that we will hear from you and that the papers are read? Okay.
Thank you, Chair. If I can, as a way of introductions, just remind committee members that tonight's focus is specifically on our work with vulnerable children. And if you recall, those members that were present last year when we had the same or a similar set of papers, it was felt that we would convert, if you like, back to our corporate parenting report and not just submit the annual IRO report, which you do also have in your papers as background information. So I just wanted to advise the committee that we've reverted back to that style of reporting, which I believe was more akin to the questions that you were asking last year.
Can you speak a little more into the mic, please?
Sorry.
Thank you.
So basically, we've reverted back to a previous style of report that we have used following the comments from last year, but the actual annual IRO report is also in your papers for reference. So basically, there's an additional report to which my colleague Alex Hanford is going to take you through. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. As you introduced me, I'm Alex Hanford. I'm Head of Social Work for Families and the lead for Looked After Children. I'm really delighted to be able to share this annual corporate parenting report with you this evening, which gives an overview of the cohort of children and young people in the Royal Borough of Kensington, Chelsea, who are in our care and are moving on to be care leavers. The report covers the period between April 2020 and March 2021. First of all, I'd like to just say how very proud we are of our looked after children and our care leavers, many of which, when they come into our care, have had very difficult early life experiences and have suffered adversity prior to coming into our care. When we think about our looked after children and care leavers, we continually ask ourselves, would this be good enough for our own children? We listen to them, and that's absolutely key, and we take consideration of their views and wishes. A good council will do that as a whole, and we do that in partnership also with our partners. We're very, very pleased that since 2019 that we've refreshed our corporate parenting panel, of which our lead member, Councillor Rendell, is our lead and chair. This meeting is made of cross-party members, senior officers within the council, and looked after children and care leavers attend that meeting. We meet quarterly, and the focus of that meeting is to hear back from children and young people who are in our care about things that are going well for them and things that we might be doing we could maybe be doing better for them. We listen to children in a variety of different ways, so that might be via a social worker going to visit them, hearing from the virtual school, which is covered in the report, or the specific officers who are related to looking out for our looked after children's health needs. But we also, 4 times a year, have formal consultations which are based around our strategic objectives. So to give you an example of that, in August we did a consultation thinking about stability for our care leavers and those children preparing to leave our care in relation to housing. We were really pleased that 50 young people responded to that questionnaire and gave us some really good ideas and thoughts about actually how we could improve our offer to them. As a result of that consultation and the recommendations that the young people came up with, officers responded in what we would describe as a report, which we call You Said We Did. And that really explains the things that we're going to do in response to the areas that the young people have highlighted. That response was compiled by senior officers and colleagues within the housing department, And as a result of that consultation, and you said we did, we have now got an improved response to our care leavers in preparing them for their own tenancies and moving into their own accommodation, which is really positive. So, who are our looked after children? As you will see from the report, we've got 106 looked after children in our care on the 31st of March. Obviously, we do have young people who will come into our care and then for different circumstances might return home, or we move on to permanency. 38% of our 106 looked after children are unaccompanied asylum seeking children, and they're a particular group of cohort of young people who've experienced specific, often very traumatic journeys into our care. And as the report highlights, we consider very specific support to that group of young people. For example, within our virtual school, we have a specific teacher who really focuses on the education of young people that are arriving into our country and English might not be their first language. As you'll see from the report, that we've got a very diverse group of young people who are in our care, not only in terms of ethnicity, religion and background, and we try wherever possible to make sure that we have a diverse group of carers so that they are supported in every aspect of their care and well-being. As you'll see, 35% of our looked after children would fall into the black or black British background, 17% are white, and the vast majority, 69%, are actually male, which actually fits into the young people that are coming that are unaccompanied asylum seeking children tend to be young men. As you'll see from the data, that the 90% of our children that are looked after to us are over the age of 10. When children do come into our care as babies or small children, we're very successful in moving them onto permanency as soon as we possibly can do. We know that securing permanency for children is going to create the best outcomes for them, and you'll see from the report the number of special guardianship orders when children are placed permanently with family members or adults within their extended family, and also that we had 4 children that were adopted. You will see within the report that the largest cohort of looked after children are children in the age group of 16 to 17. I think there's a number of factors that contribute to that, not least because of the number of unaccompanied asylum seeking children that come into our care, who tend to come in around the age of 16 or 17, but also that cohort of children that come in later, which might have been remanded into our custody or who are beyond parental control, might fall into that category. As I said earlier, we're constantly thinking about how can we achieve the best for our looked after children, how can they achieve their best outcomes. Having a safe and secure place to live is really, really important for children in our care, but also those children that are going to remain in our care and then move on to be care leavers. You'll see in the report that stability of placement it has really improved for our looked after children. So we've only got 3% of our looked after children who've had 3+ placements, which we feel is a real achievement, because stability in key areas such as accommodation and education is going to really support those young people in achieving the best outcomes they possibly can do when they move into adulthood. So we have children that stay in our care who are then going to be moving on to being care leavers. We've got 166 care leavers, and as you'll have seen from the report, that this is a growing cohort of young people, and 48% of them are unaccompanied asylum seeking, had been previously unaccompanied asylum seeking children. And we provide support to those young people up to the age of 21 or 25, depending on what their circumstances are. As you'll see from the report, and as I said at the beginning, we're incredibly proud of many of our achievements of our looked after young people, and I'm really pleased that 19 of them are in university, and they will be supported up until the age of 25. And we always ensure that we support our young people, our care leavers, until they're in secure tenancies. As I said, the importance of secure and stable accommodation is really key for their future well-being. We're really proud that we've got 3 apprenticeships within the council this year, which again is a great opportunity for our care leavers. 87% of our care leavers are in suitable accommodation, which again is a great achievement. Those remainder of that cohort maybe they might have chosen to move back with family. They might two care leavers are in custody, or if they've chosen not to keep in contact with us. So we feel that 87% in suitable accommodation is a real achievement. I think that highlights the significant things that I wanted to share with you. Just wanted to touch on advise you of the support that we've provided to our looked after children and care leavers throughout the pandemic. We were very aware of some of their additional vulnerabilities and provided additional support. So every single looked after child and care leaver had access to a computer and internet, so that they could keep in contact with not only education if they didn't attend school for a particular reason, and within their families and their networks. We paid additional attention to them. We increased our visits and contact with them, and really had to work quite creatively to think about how could we ensure that all of their basic needs that we were focusing on were met, and are really, really pleased that we haven't had any, they've had some particular stresses, as we all have, from the pandemic, but actually have maintained stability, and we've moved them on to permanent accommodation, which is again a success. So I think that highlights the key areas of the report, and I'd like to open it up for any questions.
Excellent, thank you. Well, you clearly have provided a very thorough provision. My concern and my question has to deal with Section 5, the voice of children, because we have provided computers and et cetera during the pandemic, and lots of excellent provision. But what about those with no voice, or the young, or SEND young people, or English as a second language, or evacuees? How would they, or were they able to reach out if there was a problem during the pandemic?
Well, as I said, all of the children that are in our care, so the looked after children and care leavers, we ensured that they all had computers. We realised that actually reaching out, that we couldn't wait for them to reach out to us, so that actually we were reaching out to them. So as soon as the pandemic occurred, we made sure that they had food. We had, I would say, minimum as a weekly contact with them. We made sure that they were able to contact us. We encouraged those children who could to go to school, and actually we were quite pleased that quite a lot of our looked after children were still able to attend school. Our specific officers, for example, our looked after children's nurse would make contact with the children and young people. Our advocacy service continued to run online groups, meet with young people in person when government guidelines allowed. So I feel that we felt very confident that we were having a high level of contact with our care leavers and looked after children throughout the pandemic.
Right. I mean, the nature of the beast was it was a pandemic, so did we carry on with home visits, or how did that work? Do you feel that we exercised due diligence?
We continued with home visits, and we also would use digital platforms as necessary, in addition to face-to-face visits.
Excellent, thank you very much. Now I call on Councillor Williams, who submitted a question.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yes, I want to sort of focus on the figures on paragraph 613 on page 17, which said that, well, firstly, about half the placements were in foster homes and very few in residential settings. I'll come back to that later. But for both those, where were the other half? So nearly half the children are placed in undescribed ways.
So, as you rightly highlighted, the vast majority are in foster placements. Other children might be placed with family members. A small number might be in a residential placement, or the older teenagers would be in what we refer to as semi-independent placements.
Right. Okay, that's helpful. And also the number in residential settings, which is good, is very low. So 2%, that means 2 children. Yet we have a fairly new children's home in North Kensington, Olive House, which has, I think, about 15 places. So is that seriously under-occupied?
Sorry, I'm responsible for Olive House. It only has 6 beds.
Sorry.
Currently has 4 young people attached to it. We also have 4 studio flats where we place some of our care leavers. That is a lot of the young people who are placed away in residential are because they have perhaps additional needs. Might be children with disabilities. They might need education actually attached into the home. We don't provide that at Olive House. So, you know, it won't meet the needs of all the young people.
Sure. But if there are only 2 in residential settings, I was expecting rather more, simply for the reason you've just mentioned, that there because there are some children with complex needs who need to go to a specialist setting. So I was expecting to see more than more than 2 in residential settings. I'm a bit.
I think there are different categories of residential. So you have residential schools,
right,
which have slightly larger numbers, and then we have maybe similar types, but there may be other reasons moving them out away from the area because of criminal exploitation. So there may be a variety of reasons why they've been placed away.
The final point here is on foster placements. How many of the foster placements, obviously it must vary from time to time, typically are in the borough, elsewhere in Greater London or further afield?
I'm sorry that I don't have the exact figures, but we can get back to you
That
on
would
that
be
about
helpful.
within the borough. What we have is 27% of our looked after children are 20 miles or more away from London, but wherever possible we try to keep children as local to the borough as possible. Obviously one of the challenges is accommodation and the size of accommodation for foster carers, and sometimes we do need to move children away from the borough and indeed London for their own safety, or indeed if they've been placed with a family member as a long-term care plan, that might also be outside of London.
I think it would be helpful in future to sort of give those figures about the broad geographical footprint of the foster placements, because obviously one concern is if they are placed some distance away, whether you can keep in touch with them so effectively as if they are, well, not necessarily in the borough, but within Greater London.
Yes, we'll make sure that we do that in future.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard Derricky, who can't be here this evening, has asked me to pass along the following questions in his absence. In paragraph 6.15, 87 children were placed out of borough. Where? Were they in neighboring boroughs, in London, outside of London? And when a child is placed out of area, the local authority is meant to notify the relevant health service and to notify the destination and to check the quality of the provision. Do we do this? Do we keep tabs on people who are placed outside of the borough?
Yeah, I can give you assurances that the focus that we provide on children that are placed out of the borough is very, very robust. Children are seen on a very regular basis by their allocated social workers. They're seen by, they have contact with the virtual school teachers, the independent reviewing officers, the looked after children's health nurse, and obviously the professionals that they are working, that they're in contact with locally, for example, a school or any other local GP, so local services locally. We have a placements team within the borough, and that placements team has a very robust quality assurance framework. So any time a child is going to be placed outside of the borough, then they will go and visit that placement. They will quality assure that. And we ensure that children who are placed out of their borough, they have as much contact with family members and that's appropriate as any child who's placed within the borough. So there's very robust oversight of those children who are placed out of the borough. We're very aware of the vulnerabilities that can create.
Okay,
And
thank
when we
you.
look at the figures outside of the borough, it might be that they're actually maybe only placed in a neighbouring borough, which is
Okay,
not
that would
being
be helpful.
LBKC. Yeah.
He further asks, in paragraph 8.5, as of 31st March 2021, 67.2% of care leavers were in education, training, or employment. What were the rest doing? Do they know? If not, why? Or do you know? If not, why?
We do have a cohort of young people who aren't engaged in education, and we have a panel that incorporates the virtual school and works with us to try and identify additional training needs. But these will be young people who are finding it difficult to engage in those sorts of activities. But obviously they are a focus of our attention. You know, there's quite a lot of work trying to encourage them into projects like Kickstart, obviously apprenticeships, and we have a dedicated worker that focuses within, virtual school, who focuses on that group of young people. But it is a challenge.
Right. And in paragraph 8.9, while 87% of the care leavers were in suitable accommodation, the remaining 13% were made up of young people either in prison or missing. I think Robert Atkinson's he has brought that up in the past. And how have these young people gone missing, and will they be found again?
I just need to correct that statistic, if that's okay.
Sure.
87% of young people are in suitable accommodation. That's, I think, 16 young people, or 18 young people altogether who aren't. They're a mixture. Only 2 of those actually were in custody. Mm-hmm. The others were made up of 1 young person not requiring a service, 8 young people who had returned to live with family, and 7 young people who were refusing contact. So actually, none of that was related to missing, so that's an error in the report.
Okay, thank you very much.
But I would pass over, you track missing, looked after young people, don't you?
Sorry, Angela Flarhive, I'm the Head of Safeguarding for Children's Services. Yes, so we do, as part of our quality assurance framework, we track those children, resident borough children missing and children looked after who is missing. I think our numbers are really quite small. At the close of Q2, we had 7 looked after children missing, usually for short durations of time. We don't monitor care leavers because, of course, they are adults over the age of 18. And I think the only significant issue we have about care leavers is those who who choose to disengage with us of their own free will, and so aren't technically missing. But we do keep closely monitored our looked after children who may go missing for maybe a night or 2. They all have return interviews, welfare visits undertaken. We track all of that. We track the quality of the assessment, engagement with the young people, and we understand their push-pull factors, but also thinking about who has the best relationship to make change and to understand what can make a difference to cease those missing episodes.
Thank you. Now I'll ask the rest of the committee, does anyone else have any questions? Councillor Atkinson.
Thank you. I mean, if I can start by saying I think this is a very good report, and I think it's been very well presented tonight. You've covered lots of the things I was going to ask. I've been involved with this for a very long time, and some of the things are still the same, but at least you recognise where the pinch points and the questions are. It's depressing that our unaccompanied children numbers, that people come from different places but for the same reasons than previously. I am heartened by the fact that we now do seem to do a lot more about getting people housed. I've always said that this was the key to stability, and if people aren't housed, they're not going to go anywhere. Similarly, tracking their education, I think is good. I've got just 2 or 3 little questions, really. Olive House, I don't know. I've not come across it before. Is it envisaged that the young people living there will stay for a long time, or is it are they on their well, is it transit, or is it that they'll stay a long time?
The age group really of young people who come into that home are 15 onwards, but actually 16, 17 usually. We would hope that they would stay on, but until they're 18, and a large number do. But obviously we work with them to see if we can get them back home. Because at that age, they're really, there are issues around parenting capacity, dealing with maybe perhaps some challenging behaviours, maybe criminal behaviours, and so we put a lot of work into trying to get them home. But if not, they'll probably stay there till they're 18, and then we'll support them through semi-independent skills training and so on into semi-independent accommodation, and then finally into final stage.
Okay, thank you for that. Can I, the reference to foster parents and placing people out of borough, or are we still in the situation that London boroughs are competing with each other for foster parents? Are we stealing Hammersmith's and Hammersmith stealing ours?
We still have a tri-borough fostering service, so that's a shared service. So they cover Hammersmith and Fulham, Westminster and Kensington and Chelsea. We have some children that might be placed in what we refer to as commission placement, so they're independent fostering agencies.
Yeah.
And they tend to be outside of the three boroughs.
Okay, and then if I may, one final question, which again, I'm just curious about it. This national scheme for sharing out responsibility, which I saw was relaunched in July. Oh, it's bottom of para 7.1, the national transfer scheme. It says it's relaunched, but it does sound as if it's pretty toothless anyway. So,
just so people understand, the Home Office sort of ascribe a figure, a cap, if you like, of unaccompanied young people in each local authority, and that's based on the size of the children's population, so 0.07, we call it the 007 figure. Our cap is 20. We currently, as of today, probably have 51 or 52 young people. The National Transfer Scheme was voluntary. It didn't work. The local authorities were consulted, and just recently, as you know, the government have made it mandatory. Just to say, we've managed to put 4 young people onto the scheme recently, so the early signs are a bit, a bit more positive than they have been. But we do have quite a high number of young people coming to us, but we'll work with them, for as long as we need to and should, obviously. But we'll see how the National Transfer Scheme works.
So it would never be. Sorry, if I'm just ask again, Chair. It would never be that we would be seeking to move people unwillingly to another area.
the importance is to refer immediately, really, so that there's no... the worst thing that could happen is a young person that becomes settled and then, you know, they move on. We wouldn't advocate that. But these initial transfers are happening very quickly. So, you know, we'll see.
Thank you very much.
I see our expert, Jane Humphreys. You'd like to make a comment and perhaps help us sum up here.
Sorry, excuse me. I just on that point about the National Transfer Scheme, as somebody who obviously covers the London area, but also meets with colleagues outside, what I would reflect back to yourselves and London local authorities generally, you've punched above your weight in accepting unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. It's probably the rest of the country that need to, you know, stand up and be counted, because you're actually way above your quota as a London boroughs. So that's to be applauded, really, about how welcoming London local authorities have been, because there's outside of London, you know, I speak as somebody who comes from the northeast. No, actually the local authority I worked in, there were two, but the rest of the local authorities, you know, it really, they were not prepared. And of course that's part of the reason why this scheme now is not, you know, is going to be mandated, because London local authorities, you can't keep on, because the implication is not that you don't want to, the implications both in relation to resources and cost are massive, you know, because you're keeping those children, young people, they become care leavers. That's great, but then you're not awash with placements in London. You know, that's one of the challenges you have as a region as well. So I think it'll be interesting to see how it all pans out, really.
I mean, maybe it's simplistic, but it does seem to me that if local authorities in other parts of the country are unwilling, then they should at least give us their money if they won't take. I mean, in that respect, it would seem sensible to me that if a local authority is told what numbers it should be taking and refuses, then they, as I say, they should be fined substantial amounts of money.
May I come in, Chair, please?
Yes, please.
I think it's important to say that with unaccompanied asylum-seeking children, we do get a grant. So it's a grant that's given centrally from government, irrespective of where you would be. So that grant would follow the child.
Well, I'm hoping it will save the Education Department's finances. Sorry, Chair.
Yes. Excellent. Well, thank you for sharing. It was a very interesting report and very good questions. Did anyone else? Oh, sorry. Hamish? Thanks. Councillor Durian?
Slightly fewer questions. I think most of them have been covered by colleagues, so hopefully it won't take too much time. Okay, on 6.8, there's a list of statistics of the ethnic breakdown of the LAC population. Just wondering how that compares, those percentages actually compare to the actual demographic percentages in the borough, and if there is a disparity, and I'm guessing there probably is, have we identified any reasons for that? And in the following paragraph, it talks about the commitment to recruiting a cohort of carers that's also comparable and representative of the diversity of the population. What steps have we been taking to try and encourage a wider range of people to apply as carers? Thank you.
Unfortunately, I don't have the statistics of the borough to hand, but I would imagine that there's a disproportionate number of black or black British children which are in our care, which you've alluded to a number of reasons that we could attribute to that. In terms of recruiting foster carers within the borough, that has been a challenge for a number of years, to be honest, not least because of accommodation. So the fostering department, the team, tries to be as creative as we possibly can do, so they would be advertising, trying to reach out to particular communities, so particular papers, groups, local community groups, to see whether there are any people who would be interested in becoming in foster carers. But I would say that it's an ongoing challenge to find, given the diversity of the children within our care, to find foster carers that reflect all of that diversity. But it's an area that we continue to to aspire to.
Any particular barriers that we believe may be impeding people from different communities from applying to become carers?
I think it's more, I think there's more of an issue around accommodation size. So if you look at the statistics, young people coming into care, they're often older, and that requires more space in housing, and that's a real challenge in this borough. So I won't have all the statistics now, but we can check. But, you know, in days gone by, we'd have plenty of foster carers for babies because you don't require an additional room. But a teenager needs their own space and so on. So I think that's a real difficulty for us in this borough. And so we recruit on the other side, you know, in other boroughs as well, to try and compensate for that. Okay. But I think that would be one of the main issues.
I think aside from foster carers, many of the young people, particularly unaccompanied asylum-seeking children, don't necessarily want to reside within a family. They've been living independently on their journey to the country, and that represents nearly 50% of our looked-after children at the moment. So SIL accommodation, where they're a bit more independent, seems to meet their needs. Obviously, that has to be closely assessed, and we need to determine that they can flourish in that kind of environment. And if not, then obviously a family placement would be where we would prefer them to be.
Okay, thank you. One, maybe two more questions, Chair, if I may. Just staying on the unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. On 7.3, it talks about the unaccompanied minors presenting themselves to the local authority who were deemed to be adults by the Home Office. And unless I'm misunderstanding the way it's been written, it appears that nearly half of those presentations we have accepted them as children. Does that mean we've been essentially overruling the decision of the Home Office, coming to a different conclusion to the Home Office and accepting them as children, even though the Home Office had deemed them to be adults? Can you explain a bit more about what?
So the Home Office are placing all asylum seekers within hotels within central London. So, you know, to cope with the numbers coming in, but also certain local authorities like Kent, I think, have closed their borders to accepting any more. So they're typically placing families and single adults in the hotels, and then a young person will come forward and say, we've been wrongly assessed. The assessment at the borders is quite limited, maybe a few lines on a piece of paper as they come through. It's something that we're challenging the Home Office on for two reasons. Firstly, if they are making a mistake, they're placing children in a vulnerable situation, and that's not right. But secondly, you know, obviously we then have to undertake age assessments and obviously make our own judgment, and we are finding, as many boroughs are, that quite a large number of those young people classed as adults are within a kind of benefit of doubt. You know, it's very difficult to age assess, but in our view, if somebody is looking, you know, appears to be 17, 18, 19, you're going to have to apply some benefit of the doubt, because you can't prove either way. There are some young people who are clearly 25 and older, and so we have to undertake an age assessment with people who are quite skilled at doing that after many years, and then we make a judgment. And if we feel they're young, we have to take, you know, that's the right thing to do, is to provide them with accommodation and look after them.
And how does that then affect the funding that we receive from government?
That's
if we
fine.
make
We put a claim in and it's accepted.
So that will then follow?
Yes, so we get the funding for it.
Okay.
I don't think there's been a case where the Home Office has disputed that. They are trying to improve things by undertaking more robust assessments at port, but they are very limited.
Okay.
Just to add another comment to my colleague, recently a local authority in West London, there was a judicial review where they had failed to accommodate a child living in a hotel, and they were severely criticised during the period of the assessment. So our position would be, if a child is, or if a young adult is presenting, we have a duty to assess them and undertake the age assessment, during which time we would accommodate them until we concluded our assessment. And that isn't what a neighbouring authority did, and they were severely criticised. So this is a very adversarial area in court, and there's been a number of test cases that we have to apply appropriate due diligence in order to convince the court of our judgment, whether that be them being a child or them being an adult.
Sure, thank you. I think my final question, and possibly it's been answered to some extent, I think, by all the comments, but I wondered if we have a view really as a council on adoption. I mean, adoption wasn't mentioned very much at all in the report, and possibly it's understandable to some extent, given I think the age of many of the children that we're placing. But I wondered if there are any thoughts or comments on adoption. Is that something we want to try and encourage more of in our cohort? There are some younger children. Is that something we actively try and promote? Do we actively look for prospective adopting parents? What's the overall position that we have on that?
So I'm the agency decision maker on adoption. So in essence what that means is that I have to make a best interest decision based on the assessments that have been undertaken. So those assessments would be on the parent's parental capacity and whether or not the assessors have deemed the parents to be able to care for the child in the long term, and or ultimately whether or not there are other family members that may be willing to assess the child for the long term. So I think that whenever you're looking at adoption, you should also be looking at special guardianship orders as well, child arrangement orders, all of which give some security to the child's permanency. I think that adoption was once the only order that we had. We now have a range of orders that we can make to ensure a child's permanency. So last year we did, in the report it says that we had 4 adoptions. Yeah. That was relatively high for us. And this year I think we're likely to have 1 or 2. That's more akin to the amount that we normally have annually. But there are another range of other orders that are being made that secures children's permanency. I also chair the Borough's Permanency Board, so we are forever looking and parallel planning for children around permanency and making sure that wherever possible we can ensure that there's no delay to those decisions. So permanency is really, really important for a child's security, stability, all of the things that my colleagues have actually said in terms of their ongoing outcome. So it's an area that the minute a child comes into care, we should be thinking permanency.
Thank you.
Irrespective of whether that be adoption or something else.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. We've had quite a robust discussion here tonight. We've talked about unaccompanied minors, fostering children, adopting children, evacuees. But what I see, we can never become complacent. And this is why I'm going to throw out the final question to you, and when as our summation. Where is our weakest link? Where can it go wrong, if it would go wrong? Do any of you have any thoughts on that? Do we have any weak links? I mean, there's always something. What do you think?
I think there's a number.
Thank you, Glenn.
I think there's a number of areas that we can be anxious about or worry about, and that tends probably to be adolescents entering care. Have we made the right decision? Should we have done it earlier? If we make the decision for them to come into care, will they comply with the expectations that we have of them when they're in care? So I can think of one case in particular I recently audited, and I contacted the young person personally. Despite the efforts that we made to promote her well-being, she saw us as being intrusive and changing her life. I would argue we changed her life to secure her from being exploited. She didn't see it that way. So I think that certainly for older children, there's always that professional dilemma about whether or not we're making the right decision. I think for younger children, I think that the question around adoption is one that you always have to apply appropriate due diligence, because you're severing the link from their parents. So they're decisions that aren't made lightly. They're made with a very heavy heart, and it's never nice to make a permanent decision to remove somebody's parental responsibilities. So I think that whether they're seen as weaknesses, I think that they are areas that we have to provide a whole array of sensitivity to, because they're complex decisions to make.
Yes. Councillor Rendell?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, that's a really good question, actually. And I think for me, in this role and my role as well, especially what we've just talked about, corporate parenting, and again, I don't necessarily think it's, like you said, it's complacency. We should never be complacent with everything. But one of my big concerns, and I do speak with Glenn about this frequently as well, is our children in care who go missing. So we do have children every year that will just go off the radar. And that it's a big worry and concern to me. It's just saying, how are we following up with them? How are we ensuring their safety? How are we ensuring that they haven't fallen into any danger, whether that's criminal gangs or county lines or anything like that? What are we doing to ensure that their safeguarding is assured? And what are we doing to follow up with them and bring them back into the fold of that as well? We do get some in care, as we said, or we do get some accompanying asylum seeker children who also do go missing as well. So for me, that is a worry and a concern, because we all have a responsibility for children in our care. But we do take on lessons learned. We do look at what we can do better in those circumstances. But I'm not sure Glenn wanted to fill further details about that, but that's something that I have wondered about and worry about myself. But I know we've got the wonderful officers that work on this on a daily basis, but that's one issue that I think we could look into further as well.
Thank you. Anybody else? Excellent. Well, thank you very much. We shall now move on to Safeguarding Self-Assessment Report. The Select Committee is seeking to review the Directorate's annual social care self-assessment that was submitted to Ofsted. Linked to this item, the latest child protection report has also been appended. If members agree, I would like to take this report as read. You happy? Okay. Glenn Peach, Director for Family Services, is here and will now answer questions on the self-assessment. And Angela Flahive, Head of Safeguarding Review, will speak to the child protection report. So, shall we kick off with the questions? We have 3 that have already been submitted. I will start, and I'd like to know, where are the police? Are they carrying their weight? Are they working with you? And do they have an equal role? Are they taking their investigations appropriately and timely? And do you feel that they are doing proper assessments?
Police don't necessarily do assessments, they investigate, and they investigate alongside us. Whenever we intervene in a family's life, if, for example, we feel that significant harm has happened, that may trigger what's called a Section 47 investigation, and we have a responsibility to share that information via strategy meetings with colleagues, police colleagues and health colleagues and other allied professionals. And that's really to satisfy ourselves that the threshold for our intervention is the correct threshold. And that we then debate via that strategy meeting as to the nature of the investigation and the assessment. So we would be assessing for the child's welfare needs, the police would be assessing as to, well, intervening to see whether or not there's a criminal matter for them to investigate. So those meetings are happening and those investigations are happening on a daily basis. And I would say that we've got a strong relationship with our BCU. The one challenge that I think that is fair to say, and certainly we have asserted this, is that within the nature of the police force, often police colleagues are changing because they go from one department to another. So therefore the degree of expertise and collective kind of history and memory that they may have on cases is not as strong as we would perhaps want it to be, but that's the nature of the police force and how it operates.
Angela?
Thank you. I just wanted to comment about that. I mean, police are one of our key safeguarding partners under the newish local safeguarding partnership regulations, expectations. They play a key role. I agree with Mr. Peach around the issues around losing some of that local knowledge with turnover, and that's something we've escalated and challenged through the partnership. In terms of initial responses to child protection investigations, they are robust. The child abuse investigation team, which is co-located with our multi-agency safeguarding hub, which is 3 boroughs, are robust. They are informed. The sergeants there are committed to working in partnership with us. But with any, I think, organisation that is so big, there are challenges that come with that.
Thank you very much. Yes, Jane Humphreys.
Chair, could I just come in there? I mean, just adding on that point, I think one of the things when we were sort of discussing in the pre-meeting, I've absolutely no doubt that immediate response from the police to your Section 47s, your strategy meetings, and no doubt attending initial conferences, I hope to be there. I think this is more of an issue for the safeguarding partnership because, you know, they're equal partners, the police, with health and the local authority, but for me it's about the safeguarding partnership holding the police to account, and are they doing the QA type processes that the local authority do day in, day out. So is somebody within the police looking at the decision making that's made within the police, whether they decide to refer to the CPS, whether they decide to charge, whether they're looking at information that's coming in to the police, and whether they're deciding to go out on that. Now you'll have seen in the media about that, the tragic case. There was clearly some issues raised with the police from one of the family members of the little boy, and it would appear that wasn't responded to. And I think there's just a bit of me about the safeguarding partnership. There's a lot of QA stuff goes in from the local authority. Who within the police is checking the decision makers of the police within the police about what they're doing in single agency, and where is that coming in through to the safeguarding partnership? So I think that's a key thing, and it's not, you know, it's for all safeguarding partnerships. We're very good at looking at the local authority and getting that quality assurance about decision making and audits. What are the police doing internally to check the decisions they're making on a day-in, day-out? Where's their checks and balances? And I think that's a really useful question to ask the safeguarding partnership and the chair.
Would you like to answer that?
I'm just curious as to whether or not that's the next report, which is
Yes.
the third report is the safeguarding
Oh, sorry.
partnership. This
Yes.
is the self-assessment. So,
Okay, we can
excuse
hold
me,
that.
Chair.
No, you're right, sorry.
Thank you.
To be honest, they are all related, so I think the
But
issues
they are all
overlap.
interlinked, yeah, I do agree.
Yes. So I'll call on Amanda Sayers. You had a question on A5, Appendix 2.
Sorry, yes. So Appendix, so A5 Appendix 2, the Child Protection Update Report. I read with interest at Section 15, the statement, it says regarding the safeguarding support to refugees and evacuees, and I read with interest, we're also in 15.2, we're also supporting schools who have provided places in primary and secondary schools. Both of the schools that I am affiliated with, or rather neither of the schools that I am affiliated with, believe they've received any support, and to quote one of the head teachers, we've just been left to get on with it apart from the uniforms. So, sorry.
I'd be very interested to know the schools, and I will follow that up. Certainly through our contact through the safeguarding services with the designated safeguarding leads within those schools. So it is focused on the safeguarding offer around advice to the school to deal with child protection safeguarding issues. Now, I understand there may be some more general issues about support being offered to the school, which I will gladly pick up. But I know that offer is open to all the designated safeguarding leads. We have a dedicated post to support schools around safeguarding issues as they arise, and it's open for consultation, advice and support to be offered to all schools within the borough. So I'm very happy to follow up on those key issues and make sure the correct council officer responds to those.
Thank you. I'm sure that would be appreciated.
If I can also add, in relation to the Afghan evacuees and children being placed in particular schools, we are developing a integrated social work service, and that team is just beginning to form. As you can imagine, it's taken a while to recruit, and we're hopeful that those particular dedicated social workers will have a link with the schools where they've taken quite a high number of evacuee children, so we'll ensure that we follow that up as well.
One of the schools, I think, of mine has taken in 31 children, so yes, it has been a concern. Thank you.
Yes. And Councillor Freeman sent in this question. How are children who are placed out of the borough monitored? Can you be specific about visits? Who makes the visits?
Is that in relation to looked after children? Because we only place children out of the borough. I think we've answered that question previously.
He just wanted to know in relation to the safeguarding, but yes.
Thank you, Chair. I can answer that in respect to our quality assurance and review function within the council.
That's a very good way to look at it.
So each looked after child has, as well as an allocated social worker, allocated independent reviewing officer, who in law is charged with the oversight of the delivery of that child's care plan. So they ensure that on a first initially a monthly, then 3 monthly, and then thereafter 6 monthly, that care plan is reviewed, that their needs are being met, that it's updated appropriately, the placement needs are looked at, and also ensures that that child, young person, is being seen on a regular basis. And also will ensure that access to other services or support, and that may be advocacy, it may be educational through the virtual school. So their job is to really link all that together and show that, and really showcase ensure that the best offer we can in terms of our corporate parenting responsibilities is delivered. And they have the same access to resources, and we are ambitious about their outcomes, both educationally, physically, emotionally.
Oh, that was very, I enjoyed your specificity. It's more thorough. Thank you very much. I think because these two, A5 and A6, overlap, let's move to A6, and then we have some further questions, if everyone's happy. Oh, sorry, you had one more on this, sorry.
Yes, I mean, it concerns with social work, and I think I was very struck with the BBC press reports following the conviction of Senator Arthur Ladin, accused killers. Professor Jonathan Dickens was interviewed, and he said it is very important for social workers to have the support to ask the difficult questions. And I know historically this borough has always been top of the class in terms of its stability, the quality of its social work. And I think this was perhaps something that wasn't sort of really, I think, addressed enough in the report. And I mean, I'm just really looking for assurance that we have, A, a fairly stable workforce of social workers, and B, there is appropriate mentoring and support for the younger social workers, because I think time in the game where there have been failings in other cases, it has been because there have been agency staff, sort of inexperienced managers, all those sorts of problems which thankfully we've avoided.
I think that's a really important question, and I think that there are stark differences, I would say, in relation to the Royal Borough's workforce in terms of social workers vis-à-vis other local authorities that may have different types of challenges. So we do have a relatively stable workforce. We certainly have a very stable management team that supports them, and we have a robust training offer, including our systemic training offer, which is post-qualification, which really does help people to think about the ways in which they can develop relationships with people, but equally ask those challenging and difficult questions that I think you're referring to, in a way that doesn't sever the relationship and in a way that hopefully brings about positive change for the child. I think that the other point that I would really want to echo and reinforce is, and I'm sure my colleague Ms Farhive will reinforce this, is the robust quality assurance framework that we have in place. So we have a series of thematic audits that we all take charge of in terms of the senior leadership team. We also undertake, so that's on a monthly basis, but we also have 6 monthly, you might say back to the floor type activities where we observe practice, we go out and work alongside our social workers, and we also audit cases very robustly as well. So we are charged with asking some of those challenging questions as well to assure ourselves that standards are at the point that we would want them to be. We are an outstanding authority. We want to make sure that we're not complacent, that we continue to challenge ourselves in relation to what can be very complex sets of circumstances.
Yes, I'd just sort of like to say that I'm reassured by that, and it's what I expected. But I think it might be helpful in self-assessment to say something about staffing matters, because that's absolutely critical.
Thank you. We'll make sure that we add that next time. Thank you.
Yes, I think that's a very important point, because inexperience among social workers is really one of the weak points, isn't it? And the fact that you are offering support to the new social workers on an ongoing basis is very reassuring.
We also monitor social workers that are post 2 years qualified, so we have quite a high number within our respective locality teams that have a variety of experience, but quite a significant amount that are post qualified.
Chair, one of the other ways that you as a committee could also get some reassurance is if you actually, I don't know whether you do frontline visits yourself and be involved in things like the practice learning weeks, because actually, I think staff welcome that, but actually if you wanted to talk with frontline staff and observe that, that would be a very positive message to staff, but it also would give you some sense of, if you ask that question, how do you assure yourself about quality of practice and what's happening on the front line? If you go out and visit, whether it's your front door or you go and see a particular team, that certainly would be a very positive message, and certainly would be very well received by external regulators as well.
Chairman, I'd just say that obviously something to discuss at a future occasion, but certainly the adults, the old scrutiny, adult social care and health scrutiny committee always used to do visits, not only to particular settings, but also to sort of projects, shall we say. And I mean, this is just the sort of thing I think you could do. Just one member goes in and makes a report to the committee.
That's a very good idea. Are you volunteering yourself?
Yes, if it's in the next few months.
Thank you very much. I'm sure that would be in good hands. Excellent. So shall we move on to A6, please, the Local Children's Safeguarding Partnership Addendum. This addendum report provides an update to the 2019-2020 Local Safeguarding Children Partnership Annual Report, which was circulated last year to this committee. The report provides an update on the work of the partnership from October 2020 to March 2021. You may ask why it's such a short time, but that's because we had a tri-borough system, correct, beforehand, and we have gone to a bi-borough system. So if members agree, I would like to take this report as read. Angela Flahive and Emma Biskupski, the LCSP manager, are here today to answer any questions we have. So first of all, the obvious question is, have we gained from reducing to a by-borough system? Are we happy with that? Is it less complicated? Is it easy? Do we get more resources? Your assessment, please.
Hi. I would say it's early days still for the new partnership that's working across Kensington and Chelsea and Westminster, which started in April. I would say having the by-borough arrangements probably does simplify things and make things more straightforward for certainly our local authority colleagues who already collaborate very closely together. It does present more challenges for our colleagues in the police and health agencies who have to now spread themselves more thinly across two partnerships, including the one in Hammersmith and Fulham.
Thank you.
Chair, I think from a safeguarding perspective and one who's involved in child protection, there is the simplicity of a by-borough approach, and having that really running alongside a by-borough adults safeguarding partnership board approach makes absolute sense for us in children's services. It enables us to have synergy across both partnerships boards, work jointly together on a number of key projects as we have been taking forward the issues around transitions, modern day slavery, our offer to the Afghan evacuees. It's really about strengthening that safeguarding practice across for all of those living within our borough. I think there's synergy as well in terms of the focus of the work and the time. Our time is much more dedicated to local issues and making a difference locally. I do take on, as Emma's just outlined, the challenges for some of our partners in police and health. I think they were already there anyway, and it's asking a little bit of them, but a little extra of them, but where we can have a greater impact and achieve more.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, we have Councillor Williams. You sent in a question on section 13. Should I read it out? What about the further education sector, the extent of pastoral care, representatives of older children in the partnership? Who would like to speak to that?
I think my concern was that you referred to working with secondary schools, but a lot of children who, particularly the less academic ones, complete their education at colleges, and they always wonder whether, I just get a feeling that generally there's less pastoral support in colleges than in schools for the post-16s.
Just to reassure you that our safeguarding need for schools and education does include a lot of work with our local colleges. They do attend our safeguarding forums for our designated safeguarding leads. So there's active participation from our colleges in those forums where they get a chance to share information, best practice with other colleagues across the sector. In addition to that, we are actively looking to see if we can increase our engagement with colleges on some of our subgroups and also at the main LSCP where there is a gap at the moment. So there is a focus on that. We're not ignoring or wishing to minimise the role of colleges in any way.
Excellent. Now I have a question from Amanda Sayer, please.
Yes, it's actually a question regarding the LADO's report. I hope this is an appropriate point to ask it, because at page 113 you're referring to the LADO, and I couldn't see anywhere else to really pop this report in. So I found something that was contained in the report the most worrying thing of all to me, which is at page 11 of the report. It states, we're aware of a number of less established church and faith groups operating in our by-borough area. and we've had no referrals at all from these settings, given the majority of current referrals come from the education sector. The safeguarding services are curious as to why we've had no referrals. So I have questions off the back of that. First of all, what authority do we have regarding ensuring safeguarding procedures are put into place in those settings? And then what governance is there to ensure safeguarding procedures are embedded and followed? And really, I find it quite alarming, given that I'm the, would you believe, the safeguarding lead governor in one of my schools and the chair governor in the other, and we're all over safeguarding, and it's all very imminent, very important in the nation. These schools or settings are just left for substantial periods of time, potentially with nothing. I find it alarming.
I think there's an awareness on our behalf of that. There is a gap, I think, in terms of, as I said, as is in the report by our Safer Organisations and LADO manager, that there is we do have a concern about that area. And it's one about strengthening practice and support, and which is what we've done with a number of areas, for instance, like our education school settings, where there are a huge amount of safeguarding knowledge experience, and they use us appropriately on consultations and advice and refer in. I suppose for us it's in part is mapping out what the provision, what the faith groups and settings and some of those connected education environments may be. We've done some targeted work around the out of school settings. And not those are connected to groups, about heightening their level of awareness around safeguarding. Some of the more organised religious settings will have a role, so the Anglican Church, the Catholic Church, we work closely with their safeguarding leads. Many of the issues that we do get involved with are historical matters, so may not be current. There is a piece of work, I think, about engaging, especially after COVID, about making those links again and re-establishing networks. Do you want to add something?
Just to add to...
One of the questions I asked was, what authority do we have? So, for example, in schools, I think it's right, isn't it? Unless you're sent into special measures because of safeguarding by Ofsted, you can't actually go in and remove a board, or so. I'm not quite sure what you can do with the madrasas, for example.
No, it's one of influence and support and enablement, and it's providing support, advice, and consultation, and ensuring they know the benefit of having that rigour, not only for the protection of the children, but also for the staff that they may employ and the adults within that environment.
And if I may follow... Sorry, Josh.
No, sorry, after you.
If I may follow, just to say that we attended the RBKC Faith Forum not that long ago in order to raise awareness about the Multi-Agency Safeguarding Children Partnership, our training offer, and the advice and guidance that we can give. In addition to that, we're looking to seek a representative from one of our faith groups to join us on one of our multi-agency subgroups, which is our Children and Community Engagement subgroup. So that will bring in the voice of part of that sector in order to help boost our links and our relationships, because I think building that trust is really key. I think in addition to that, one of the pieces of work that we're embarking upon within that subgroup is looking at how we can strengthen our guidance and our advice to the faith and voluntary sectors. And so we're developing a bit of a handbook, if you like, for that sector that will have some of the kind of key gold standards: what is safeguarding, where you can access training, what a safeguarding policy should look like, how you make a referral if you're concerned about a child, how you make a referral if you're concerned about a volunteer or a member of your staff, to the LADO, etc. So all of those measures we hope will seek to increase that engagement and the relationship that we have.
Then I'll come in as well, if that's okay, Amanda, as well. That's a really good question, actually, and one that often been think about. You're right that we don't have a right of access, we don't have a statutory authority to go in some of these places and appoint or remove whoever, people like we do at Maintain Schools, for example, where we can appoint or remove governors or use our influence with the work with our schools to kind of crack down on those things. What I've been working on as well with our Director of Commissioning Services, who's not here tonight, Annabelle Saunders, is when we do commission services that that the council provides public money for. I've made it really clear that, you know, we need to ensure that those other organisations, youth clubs, other voluntary sector organisations have really strong safeguarding arrangements in place. Angela's the expert, but Angela's right that all we can do is influence and use our knowledge and our not authority, but authority in a way that, you know, as a local authority to influence as much as possible and to ensure those particular groups, if they have gone off, you know, slightly off the rails or slightly don't understand how safeguarding works, give them proper training in place. And we're actually doing that at the moment for some of our other organisations that we do commission to, in order to ensure that they understand the severity of not having proper safeguarding arrangements in place.
Chair, could I just come in and add on to that point about the ladder, because it is an interesting area, because obviously the local authority can do that, raising awareness and you know, making people aware of that, and obviously the churches do have their, you know, the Church of England has the National Safeguarding Team, they have designated safeguarding advisors as well. But if you look at the annual report that will have been to the Safeguarding Board, or you look at any annual report that goes to Safeguarding and Ladder, one of the big areas for me that was always a concern is very few referrals from health and police. You know, if you think of them as big organisations, there's always schools followed by PVI sector, you know, childcare, childminders, and then probably social care. You're not telling me there aren't people within the health service, within the police, are maybe concerned. So I think that's always a challenge back to those partners. Are they looking at it? They may be dealing with it from a point of view of the particular member of staff, from an HR process, but are they actually thinking the ladder? And I think that's the bigger, you know, I'm not saying the areas you've highlighted are not concerned as well, but if you look at any report, if you look over your last few years, I bet your referrals from the police and health will be in single figures.
Thank you. And Councillor Schmetterling wanted to ask a question.
Thank you. First of all, apologies for being so late. I managed to arrange a flat tyre on the way back here.
Oh dear.
Where I was, sorry about that. Anyway, my questions are, actually I've got three queries, two of which I suppose are related. Shall I ask all three of them at once, and then you can answer as you wish?
We already covered the police.
Pardon?
We've already answered your question twice about the police, so why don't you go into the question?
Oh, you've done one of them? Okay.
Yes.
So the other two then are, generally, are there any reasons for the apparent rising referrals which are not explained by unsubstantiated referrals? Because obviously there's an increase in unsubstantiated ones that I saw, but that doesn't account for the total increase. And the second question in that case is, when you do comparisons and analyses by ethnic group or comparing populations, results of different boroughs, are these figures also prorated on the basis of population to get a real effect? So if, I don't know, 20% of referrals come from a particular ethnic group and they represent you know, much smaller proportion of the population of the borough, that's more critical than if you don't say that. Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Schmidt, are you referring to Section 47 referrals, or in A5, or are we on A6?
Also in A6, in general, I'm sorry, I couldn't ask for A5, but in general, because there's obviously comparisons in A6, but I was thinking, whenever such comparisons are made and analyses, is there also done a prorating on a population basis?
Chair, I think this was a question about disproportionality, if I understand it. It's, you know, whatever's coming through your front door, whatever you're dealing with, does it reflect your population? I think it's the question. Is that correct?
I think that sounds right. Yes, I think so. Yeah. Thanks.
I think there's a number of ways in which we compare and contrast, if I'm following your questions. We annually submit data to the DFE on a range of issues. That could be referrals, it could be in relation to types of cases that are coming in, etc. And that provides us our ability to be able to benchmark with London national averages and regional averages. I think also in London we have what's called the chat data, which is a range of data that we submit that's then compared and contrast across London. And sub-regionally, we look at that data quite regularly. We also focus upon peer challenge, where we believe the data lends itself for us to be able to challenge our neighbouring authorities around a range of issues. And disproportionality has been a key feature, particularly in the criminal justice system. So we have recently organised a working group across the various youth offending services across the sub-region of the West in order to compare and contrast some of the data, but equally some of the initiatives that we're undertaking to try and combat disproportionality in the criminal justice system.
Thanks. Does that mean you do compare on a population basis? So, example, if an ethnic group, I'm not sure if I was clear before, if an ethnic group represents, or a group A represents 20% of referrals, but it represents only 10% of the population, that's very significant. I mean, is that the sort of thing you do? And when you compare across boroughs and benchmarking? Okay.
Yeah, we do. And a similar question was asked before you arrived. Which was in relation to whether or not our looked after children population represented our local population, and I think that we answered that in terms of we felt that it was overrepresented by particularly black males.
Thanks. And the other one about rising referrals in general from children, what the reason is?
Can I just ask for some clarification? Is that in respect to A5 or is it in respect to LADO activity?
We received an additional report, some additional reports.
Yes.
Day or two ago.
So,
it's in there, and
yes.
And there's an analysis of the referral, where they come from, and it's only a 2-year comparison. Admittedly, it's not showing long-term trends, but I was just concerned that there's a massive increase. It may be to do with the pandemic and so on, but I don't know. That's what I was wondering.
Could I say something? I further read in the paper, this might explain it, they said that they changed the way of characterizing a referral and a contact. They separated it because they said not everything is a referral. Does that refresh your mind? Yes.
It does. Thank you, Chair. That really does refresh my mind. Previously, our database, our children's database for family services, couldn't differentiate between what was called a contact or a referral. We've subsequently made a fix to that data, but it's still pulling through data from the previous year because it does that for a full year. So at the moment, we are seeing our referral data go down rather than go up. And that's linked to the fact that we're no longer counting contacts as referrals. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thanks very much. So I guess we have to look into the future, look back after 3-4 years. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? No? Well, it seems that the review has been very helpful, and the fact that we are now a bi-borough as opposed to tri-borough, in it, the nature of it should be more less cumbersome and easier to maneuver, and more access to the young people and services. Would you agree with that, or? Yes. Okay. Well,
most definitely from a local authority perspective,
yes.
As Emma has stated, certainly partners find attending 2 boards perhaps a bit more of a challenge.
Indeed. Thank you. And now we are moving on to A7, to review our work program. And we will show you what we are going to do for the rest of the year. There are some updates and additions to our plan since our September meeting, and I would like to quickly flag those up as well as what's coming at our next meeting. At our February meeting, we're going to review the refresh of the serious youth violence strategy, and also going to discuss the report on children welfare during the pandemic with a focus on domestic abuse. Now, Paula, I understand from Richard Derricky, who's leading on the domestic abuse, that he would prefer to present it in March because there's more work. Has he confirmed that to you?
He has not confirmed that with me, Chair.
Okay, so we need to clarify if that will, it goes with the February topics, but please clarify if we will be putting the two together or not. Otherwise, it'll be in March. Thank you. And Councillor Dorian and Amanda Sayers will be working on the serious youth violence. Do you want to have a word and say what you're doing?
Early stages of planning the work for that. We're hoping to organise a round table with head teachers in the borough, talk about their experiences on serious youth violence in their schools. We're hoping to put out a call to evidence in general for parents to be able to submit anonymously their own thoughts and experiences on their involvement with serious youth violence if they wish to do so. Something else we're hoping to do, possibly in person, if not possible in person, then virtually, is to speak directly with parents who have unfortunately suffered these sorts of experiences. We'll see how we go ahead with that, but hopefully that's something we're also looking to do in the new year. So a range of viewpoints will be given to us, so we can then present a series of recommendations at the February meeting.
Thank you. And at our March meeting, in addition to examining the SEND progress and performance as originally planned, we'll also be scrutinizing the SEND transitions. As we agreed at our September meeting, we have invited Adult Social Care and Health Select Committee members to address this issue jointly with us. And Councillor Williams, who is our liaison between the two committees, would you add a few words, what you're planning to do?
Well, I'm not personally involved with any work on SEN, but it is an important topic which members are concerned about. So, yes, and it may well be that following that meeting you decide you want to do some further work, but by the very nature of the problem it sort of straddles the two committees, which is obviously administratively a potential challenge. So I'm sure we can get around it.
Yes, thank you.
I would also add that we hope that the Mental Health Working Group will produce its final report to the March meeting of the Adults Committee, which takes place before this committee, and if there's anything relevant, perhaps we could bring it to this committee.
Thank you very much. And I would like to ask our officers also if we can organize a visit for Charles Williams and myself to see the training that you're giving to social workers. I think will be very informative. That would be great. Thank you. We're also planning to have some more school visits if COVID permits. We would like to see some of the schools that have SEND provision, which are the Balby School and the Queens Mill School and the Marlborough School. And in addition, I'm hoping that Robert Atkinson and I will go to see Jack Tizard in Hammersmith and Fulham. They accept some of our students, and the rest of the committee are welcome to do that as well. So, if there is not, I guess there's an additional paper, I see, in March to provide us with a full update on the direct award of a year contract to Ormiston Academy Trust, for the delivery of alternative education in the Latimer Alternative Provision Academy, for us to scrutinize the financial health, viability, and suitability of this new provider. And I'm really looking forward to seeing that because it's very important for our students to be included.
Perhaps, Chair, if I may, and a visit to perhaps Ormiston Academy as well, maybe on your cards.
Which one, sorry?
To the Latimer Academy, which Ormiston has taken over.
Yes.
To the alternative provision as well. You may wish to do that too.
That's a good idea. Thank you. Is there any other business? Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you to the officers. Thank you to my committee. Got a lot covered tonight, and thank you to our expert, Jane Humphreys. You've been so helpful. Do you want to join our committee?
Thank you for the offer. I think I'll stay where I am.
If I don't see everyone, have a happy and healthy Christmas.